Rain hammered the city like bullets against stone. Adrian Moretti, the man who made grown men kneel with a glance, stared at his phone as if it held a loaded gun. 8 months. 8 months since Elena Cruz vanished from his life without a word. Now her name glowed on his screen, and her voice cracked through the speaker. My baby is being born right now. I have no one else. His hand tightened around the phone. The baby. Her baby. He should hang up, walk away. But even a man who'd built an empire on fear couldn't ignore the tremor in her voice. If you want to see how far a single phone call can shatter everything a powerful man ever believed, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain didn't just fall on the city, it attacked it. Water cascaded down the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse conference room, distorting the lights of the metropolis below into fractured streaks of gold and red. Inside, the air was thick with expensive cologne, cigar smoke, and the kind of tension that preceded violence. Adrian Moretti sat at the head of a mahogany table that cost more than most people earned in a year. 12 men surrounded him, soldiers, lieutenants, businessmen with blood on their hands hidden beneath Italian suits and Rolex watches. They were discussing territory. Money. The usual currency of power, but Adrian wasn't listening. His phone sat face down on the table, vibrating for the third time in 5 minutes. He ignored it. Whoever needed him could wait. In his world, everything waited for Adrian Moretti. The docks are locked down, Marco Santini was saying, jabbing a thick finger at a map spread across the table. We moved the shipment Thursday night, no earlier. The feds are watching the harbor like hawks. Then we don't use the harbor, Adrian said, his voice quiet but absolute. When he spoke, conversations died. We move it through the rail yards, pay off the night supervisor. Problem solved. Marco nodded quickly. Done. The phone buzzed again. This time, Adrian's jaw tightened. He glanced down at the screen. Elena Cruz. His pulse stuttered, a sensation so unfamiliar it almost felt like illness. He hadn't heard from Elena in 8 months. Not a word. Not a message. She'd simply disappeared one morning, leaving behind nothing but an empty closet and a hole in his chest he refused to acknowledge. He told himself he didn't care, that women came and went, that attachment was weakness. But now her name glowed on his phone like an accusation. Boss, Marco's voice cut through his thoughts. You good? Adrian's eyes lifted, cold and unreadable. Continue. Marco hesitated, then returned to the map. The rail yards give us clean access, but we'll need... The phone rang. Not a text, a call. Adrian stared at it. Around the table, conversations faltered. Everyone knew the rule. Adrian Moretti didn't answer calls during meetings. Not for anyone. But his hand moved before his mind could stop it. He picked up the phone, swiped to answer, stood and walked toward the window, his back to the room. This better be important, he said, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. Silence. Then, a breath. Shaky. Desperate. Adrian. That voice. It hit him like a fist to the sternum. Elena. His voice dropped, the sharpness replaced by something raw. Where the hell have you... I need you. Her words came fast, breaking apart. I'm at Mercy General, East Side, my baby. A gasp cut her off. Pain laced through the sound. The baby is coming right now. I don't have anyone else. Adrian's world tilted. The baby. Her baby. The question he'd buried for 8 months roared to the surface. Whose baby? But there was no time. He could hear her breathing, short, panicked, laced with agony. Adrian, please! I'm coming! He ended the call, turned back to the table. 12 pairs of eyes stared at him. Meeting's over, Adrian said. Marco blinked. What, boss? We're not done. I said it's over. Adrian's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Everyone out! Now! Chairs scraped. Men stood. They filed toward the door without another word, casting nervous glances back at their boss. Marco lingered, concern etched into his scarred face. Adrian, what's going on? Handle the rail yard situation, Adrian said, already moving toward the private elevator. I'll call you tomorrow. Tomorrow? You never leave a... Marco. Adrian stopped, looked back. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered beneath it, something almost human. Not tonight. Marco studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, boss. Be careful. Adrian didn't respond. The elevator doors closed, swallowing him into steel in silence. The drive should have taken 40 minutes. Adrian made it in 22. His black Audi R8 tore through the rain-slick streets like a bullet, weaving between cars, running red lights, the engine roaring defiance at the storm. Water sprayed in sheets across the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep up. He didn't care. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. His mind was a war zone. Her baby is being born right now. 8 months ago, Elena had been his. Not in the way he owned territories or controlled operations. She'd never belonged to him like that. But she'd been his in the way that mattered. She'd been the calm in his chaos, the softness in a life built on edges. Elena Cruz, a bookstore owner with paint-stained fingers and a smile that didn't know how to lie. She'd walked into his world by accident, a case of mistaken identity, a threat he'd neutralized, a conversation that shouldn't have lasted 5 minutes but stretched into 5 hours. She'd looked at him like he was a man, not a monster. For 2 years she'd been his secret, his escape, the only place where Adrian Moretti could stop being what everyone needed him to be and just exist. Then she left. No note, no explanation, just gone. He'd searched for her, discreetly, because men in his position didn't chase women. But every lead went cold. She'd vanished like smoke. And now, a baby. Whose baby? The question burned, but Adrian shoved it down. It didn't matter. Not yet. What mattered was that Elena was alone, in pain, and she'd called him. The hospital appeared through the rain, a squat, utilitarian building on the edge of the city where ambulances outnumbered hope. Mercy General. The kind of place where people went when they couldn't afford anywhere better. Adrian pulled into the emergency lane, abandoned the car with the engine still running, and strode through the automatic doors. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A haggard nurse looked up from behind the desk. "Sir, you can't park—" "Elena Cruz," Adrian interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She's in labor. Where is she?" The nurse's eyes widened slightly. Whether from his tone or the dangerous energy radiating off him, Adrian didn't know. She glanced at her computer. "Third floor maternity ward. But visiting hours—" Adrian was already walking toward the elevator. "Sir, you need to sign in." He didn't look back. The maternity ward was quieter than the ER, but the tension was different here. Anticipatory, fragile. Adrian moved through sterile hallways, past rooms where new fathers paced and exhausted mothers slept. He found her in room 347. The door was half open. He stopped just outside it, his hand on the frame, suddenly unsure, an emotion so foreign it nearly paralyzed him. Then he heard her voice, a low, guttural sound of pain. Adrian pushed the door open. The room was small, dim. Medical equipment beeped steadily in the corner. And there, on the bed, bathed in the sickly glow of a single overhead light, was Elena. She looked nothing like he remembered. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her face was pale, drawn with exhaustion and pain. She wore a hospital gown that seemed 3 sizes too big. Her hands gripped the bed rails so tightly her knuckles had gone white. But when her eyes found his, those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him with tenderness, they filled with tears. "You came," she whispered. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't think, didn't calculate. He just moved to her side and took her hand. "Of course I came." Her fingers closed around his like a lifeline. Another contraction hit, and her body arched off the bed. A cry tore from her throat, raw, primal. "Breathe," Adrian said, the word coming out rougher than he intended. "Elena, breathe." "I am breathing," she gasped, eyes squeezed shut. "It just hurts." A nurse bustled in, glanced at Adrian with mild surprise, then focused on Elena. "All right, honey, let's check your progress." The next 2 hours were the longest of Adrian Moretti's life. He'd been shot twice, stabbed once. He'd stared down the barrel of a gun more times than he could count and never flinched. But watching Elena in labor, watching her body racked with pain, hearing her cries echo off the sterile walls, feeling utterly powerless to stop it, was a kind of torture he'd never imagined. He stayed, held her hand, let her squeeze until he thought bones might crack, wiped the sweat from her forehead with a damp cloth the nurse provided, murmured words he didn't even know he was capable of saying. "You're strong. You're doing this. I'm right here." Well, at one point between contractions, Elena looked up at him with exhausted eyes. "Why did you come?" she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You called." "That's not a reason. Not for you." He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he was exactly the kind of man who abandoned people, that mercy wasn't in his nature, but the words wouldn't come. "I don't know," he said finally, and it was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Elena's lips curved into the faintest smile. Liar. Another contraction stole her breath. Adrian gripped her hand tighter. At 3:47 a.m., the doctor arrived, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. "All right, Elena," she said calmly, settling onto a stool at the foot of the bed. "You're fully dilated. It's time to push." Elena's eyes went wide with panic. "I can't. I don't think I can." "Yes, you can," Adrian said. His voice was firm, anchoring. "Look at me." She did. "You can do this," he said. "You're the strongest person I know." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. "Okay," the doctor said. "Next contraction, I need you to push. Ready?" What followed was chaos and pain and something so visceral that Adrian felt it in his bones. Elena pushed, screamed, gripped his hand with inhuman strength. The doctor coached. The nurse moved efficiently around the room. And Adrian stayed exactly where he was, refusing to let go. "One more big push," the doctor said. "Come on, Elena, you're almost there." "I can't." "You can," Adrian said. "Push." Elena gave a final guttural cry, and then a baby's wail shattered the silence. Adrian's breath stopped. The doctor lifted a tiny, squirming infant, slick with blood and vernix, impossibly small, impossibly loud. "It's a boy," she announced, smiling. "Congratulations." The nurse moved quickly, taking the baby to a warming station, cleaning him, wrapping him in a soft blue blanket. Elena collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with exhaustion and relief. "Is he okay?" she gasped. "Is he? He's perfect," the nurse assured her. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs clearly. She smiled. "Would you like to hold him?" Elena nodded, tears streaming. The nurse placed the baby in her arms. Adrian stood frozen, staring. The baby was small, so impossibly small. His face was scrunched, red from crying. Dark wisps of hair crowned his head. His tiny fists waved in the air. Elena looked down at him with an expression Adrian had never seen before, pure, unfiltered love. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "Hi, sweet boy. I'm your mama." The baby's cries quieted. His unfocused eyes blinked open, and Adrian felt the world tilt. Because he knew those eyes. He'd seen them every morning in the mirror for 34 years. "Elena," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whose baby is this?" She looked up at him. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yours," she whispered. "He's yours, Adrian." The room seemed to shrink. The air grew thin. Adrian stared at the baby, his son, and felt something crack open inside his chest. "You want to hold him?" Elena asked softly. Adrian didn't trust himself to speak. He nodded. Carefully, Elena shifted, and the nurse helped transfer the baby into Adrian's arms. He'd held guns, knives, weapons designed to destroy. He'd never held anything this fragile. The baby was warm, solid, real. His tiny fingers curled instinctively around Adrian's thumb. His eyes, those impossible, familiar eyes, stared up with unfocused wonder. "He has your eyes," Elena whispered. "I knew the moment he was born." Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man who commanded an empire, who inspired fear with a glance, who'd built his life on control. He was undone by 8 pounds of life cradled in his arms. What's his name? Adrian asked, his voice rough. Elena smiled through her tears. I was thinking, Gabriel. Gabriel. Adrian looked down at his son, at Gabriel, and felt the armor he'd worn his entire life begin to crack. Gabriel, he repeated. The name felt sacred on his tongue. For the next 3 hours, Adrian didn't leave. He sat in the chair beside Elena's bed, holding Gabriel while she slept. The baby dozed fitfully, occasionally fussing, and Adrian learned how to soothe him, gently rocking, murmuring nonsense that felt absurdly natural. The nurse came and went, checking vitals, offering quiet congratulations. She didn't ask questions, didn't comment on the man in the expensive suit holding a newborn like he'd discovered religion. As dawn broke outside the window, painting the room in shades of gold and pink, Adrian finally allowed himself to ask the question burning in his chest. Why didn't you tell me? Elena stirred, opened her eyes. She looked at him, at Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his arms, and her expression crumpled. I was scared, she whispered. Of me? Of your world. She sat up slowly, wincing. Adrian, I knew what being with you meant. I accepted the risks, but when I found out I was pregnant, her voice broke. I couldn't let him grow up as a target, as leverage against you, as something your enemies could use. Adrian's jaw clenched, because she was right. In his world, love was weakness. Family was vulnerability. A child would be a weapon pointed directly at his heart, and everyone would know it. So you left, Adrian said. I had to. Tears streamed down her face. I thought if no one knew, if I disappeared completely, he'd be safe. You'd be safe. I could raise him quietly, away from all of it. Why call me tonight? Elena let out a shaky breath. Because I was alone. Because I was terrified. And because she looked at him, eyes raw with honesty. Because even after everything, you're the only person I wanted beside me. Adrian stared at her. At this woman who'd loved him enough to walk away, who'd sacrificed everything to protect a child he hadn't known existed. I would have protected you both, he said quietly. I know. Elena smiled sadly. But at what cost? How many people would you have had to hurt? How much blood would you have spilled to keep us safe? Adrian had no answer, because they both knew the truth. He would have burned the world down. What happens now? Elena asked. Adrian looked down at Gabriel, at his son, at the tiny human who'd existed for less than 4 hours and had already rewritten every rule Adrian lived by. I don't know, he admitted, but as he sat there, holding his child while dawn broke over the city, Adrian Moretti understood one absolute truth. Nothing would ever be the same. By mid-morning, word had spread. Adrian's phone buzzed incessantly, messages from Marco, from other lieutenants, asking where he was, if everything was all right. He ignored them all. Instead, he watched Elena sleep, watched Gabriel sleep, felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like armor. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Marco stepped inside, careful, cautious. His eyes swept the room, taking in Elena, the baby, Adrian sitting vigil beside them, and understanding dawned on his weathered face. Boss? Marco said quietly. Not here, Adrian replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marco nodded. Outside? Adrian glanced at Elena. She was still sleeping. Carefully, he placed Gabriel in the hospital bassinet, then followed Marco into the hallway. They walked to a small waiting area, empty at this hour, plastic chairs and outdated magazines scattered across chipped tables. Talk, Adrian said. Marco ran a hand over his face. People saw you leave last night. Fast. They're asking questions. Let them ask. Adrian, Marco's voice dropped. You disappeared for 12 hours. You're never unreachable. And now I find you in a hospital, sitting with a woman and a... He trailed off, eyes widening. Is that your kid? Adrian met his gaze steadily. Yes. Marco's expression cycled through shock, confusion, then grim understanding. Jesus, does anyone else know? Just you. And the woman? Her name is Elena, and she's off limits completely. Marco nodded slowly. For how long? Forever. Silence stretched between them. Marco studied Adrian with the familiarity of someone who'd stood beside him for 15 years, through wars, betrayals, blood. You know what this means, Marco said finally. A child makes you vulnerable. If the wrong people find out, they won't. Adrian, you walked into a public hospital. You've been here for hours. Security cameras, nurses, visitors. You think no one noticed? Adrian's jaw clenched. Because Marco was right. In trying to be there for Elena, for Gabriel, he'd exposed them. We have maybe 24 hours before this gets out, Marco continued. Once it does, every rival, every ambitious soldier looking to make a name, every Fed trying to find leverage, they'll all know. That woman and that baby will have targets on their backs. Adrian's hands curled into fists. Then we move them. Safe house, private security, whatever it takes. And then what? You live a double life, sneak away for birthdays and bedtime stories while running an empire? Marco shook his head. That's not sustainable. You know it's not. What are you suggesting? Marco hesitated, then said what they were both thinking. You walk away. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. From everything, Marco continued. You disappear. New identity, new city, new life. Take them somewhere safe and never look back. I can't just abandon. You can, Marco interrupted. You've built this organization to run without you. Lieutenants in place, systems established. You step down, someone steps up. That's how it works. And the people who depend on me will survive. Marco's expression softened. Adrian, you've given 15 years to this life. You've bled for it, killed for it. Maybe it's time to live for something else. Adrian looked through the window, toward the room where his son slept, where the woman he'd never stopped loving rested. I need to think, he said. Marco nodded. You've got time, but not much. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you'd make a good father. He left Adrian alone with the impossible choice. The next 2 days passed in a surreal haze. Adrian stayed at the hospital. He told himself it was temporary, just until Elena was strong enough, until he figured out a plan. But the truth was simpler. He couldn't leave. He learned how to change diapers, badly at first, then with increasing competence. He learned that babies cried for reasons that made no logical sense and stopped crying for even less. He learned that exhaustion was a physical state he'd never truly understood. And he learned what it felt like to be needed. Not as a boss, not as a weapon, but as a father. On the second night, while Elena slept and Gabriel fussed in his arms, Adrian made a decision. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Marco, set up a meeting. Tomorrow morning, everyone. You sure about this? Marco asked. No, Adrian admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. The next morning, Adrian stood in the same penthouse conference room where this had all begun. The same 12 men sat around the same table. But everything felt different. I'm stepping down, Adrian said without preamble. Shock rippled through the room. Men exchanged glances. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. I'm serious, Adrian continued. Effective immediately. I'm out. Marco will assume operational control. Territory divisions stay as they are. Existing agreements remain in place. Anyone has a problem with that? Take it up with Marco. What the hell are you talking about? Santini demanded. You don't just leave. I just did. Why? Another lieutenant asked. Did something happen? Are the feds? This isn't about the feds, Adrian interrupted. This is personal. Personal? Santini's eyes narrowed. What's more important than my family? Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. I have a son, and I'm choosing him. Silence. Then chaos. Questions, protests, arguments about loyalty and legacy and what this meant for the organization. Adrian let them talk, let them rage. Then he raised a hand, and the room fell silent. I built this, he said quietly, and now I'm walking away from it. Anyone who has a problem with that can try to stop me. But I promise you, it won't end well. No one moved. Good. Adrian looked around the table one last time. It's been an honor. Marco, it's yours. He turned and walked out. Behind him, voices erupted again. But Adrian didn't look back. He had a son to meet, a life to start. And for the first time in 15 years, Adrian Moretti felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. The apartment Elena brought him to was nothing like Adrian expected. It sat on the fourth floor of a weathered building in a neighborhood where graffiti competed with peeling paint for dominance. The elevator didn't work. Hadn't worked in months, according to the apologetic super who held the door as Adrian carried Gabriel's car seat while Elena moved slowly beside him, still recovering. "I know it's not much," Elena said quietly as she unlocked the door. Her keys jangled in the silence of the narrow hallway. "But it's safe, quiet. No one asks questions here." Adrian said nothing. He was too busy cataloging exits, sight lines, vulnerabilities. The hallway had poor lighting, good for anonymity, bad for security. Single stairwell, fire escape visible through a grimy window at the end of the hall. No security cameras. She'd chosen well for disappearing, terribly for protection. The apartment itself was small. A one-bedroom with a kitchenette that barely deserved the name, and a living room that could fit a couch, a bookshelf, and little else. But it was clean, warm. Books lined every available surface, stacked on the floor, crammed into shelves, piled on the windowsill. The scent of old paper and lavender hung in the air. It smelled like Elena. "The bedroom's through there," she said, gesturing to a half-open door. "I've been setting up a corner for Gabriel, but I haven't finished. I didn't expect—" Her voice caught. "I didn't expect any of this to happen the way it did." Adrian set the car seat down gently. Gabriel slept inside it, oblivious to the world being built around him. "Where have you been sleeping?" The couch pulls out. "For 8 months?" Elena shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "It's fine. I've had worse." Adrian doubted that. He moved to the window, pulled back the thin curtain. The view offered a narrow street, a bodega on the corner, an empty lot where weeds pushed through cracked concrete. 3 floors down, a group of teenagers loitered near a graffitied wall, passing something between them that probably wasn't legal. "You've been living here alone," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Working?" "I do freelance editing, online. It doesn't pay much, but it's flexible." She lowered herself carefully onto the couch. Exhaustion had carved shadows under her eyes. "I made it work." Adrian turned to face her. "You shouldn't have had to." "I made my choice." "A choice I would have changed if you'd given me the chance." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Would you? Really? Or would you have tried to lock me away in some secure location surrounded by armed guards, living like a prisoner for my own protection?" Adrian's jaw tightened because she wasn't wrong. That's exactly what he would have done. Built a fortress around her, turned her life into a cage. "I wanted him to have a normal childhood," Elena continued softly. "I wanted him to go to parks without bodyguards, to make friends without background checks, to not grow up knowing that his father's name made people afraid." "And what about what I wanted?" The words came out harsher than Adrian intended. Elena flinched. "You didn't know," she whispered. "You couldn't want something you didn't know existed. That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair, Adrian." Tears welled in her eyes. "You think I wanted to do this alone? You think I didn't lie awake at night wishing you were there? Wishing things were different?" She wiped roughly at her face. "I gave up the man I love to protect our son. Don't tell me about fair." "The man I love?" Present tense. Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides, knelt in front of her. He took her hands, so much smaller than his, calloused from work he should have prevented. "I'm here now," he said, "and I'm not leaving." Elena searched his face. "You say that now, but your world—" "I left my world." Adrian's voice was firm, certain. "I walked away from all of it. The organization, the power, everything. It's done." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I stepped down this morning, handed control to Marco. I'm out." "Adrian, you can't just— That's your life. Everything you built was built on blood and fear." He squeezed her hands gently. "I don't want Gabriel growing up in that shadow. I don't want you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. So I made a choice. The same choice you made 8 months ago." His voice dropped. "I chose him. I chose you." Elena stared at him, tears streaming freely now. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Yes, I do." "No." She shook her head. Adrian, walking away doesn't erase what you were. The people you've crossed, the enemies you've made, they don't just forget, and now you've shown weakness. You've given them a target. Adrian's expression hardened. Let them come. And then what? You fight them? Kill them? That's the life you're trying to leave. She was right, and Adrian knew it. Walking away from power didn't grant immunity from consequences. It just made you vulnerable to them. Then we disappear, he said. Completely. New city, new names, new life. You'd do that? I already did. Elena pulled one hand free, touched his face. Her fingers trembled. Who are you? Because the Adrian Moretti I knew would never— He wouldn't, Adrian agreed. But I'm not him anymore. A small cry interrupted them. Gabriel was waking, his face scrunching with the promise of a wail. Adrian stood, moved to the car seat, lifted his son with a care that still felt foreign. Hey, he murmured. I've got you. Gabriel's cries quieted to whimpers. His tiny fist found Adrian's finger, gripped it with surprising strength. Elena watched them, something breaking and healing simultaneously in her expression. We need to leave tonight, Adrian said quietly. The longer we stay, the more dangerous it gets. Tonight? Adrian, I just got out of the hospital, which is why we need to move fast, before anyone connects the dots. He looked at her. Pack light. Only what you can't replace. I'll handle everything else. Where will we go? Somewhere no one will think to look. Adrian's mind was already working, cataloging options, calculating risks. Small town, middle of nowhere, the kind of place where people mind their own business. And then what? We just live there? We build a life there. Adrian said it with the same certainty he once used to issue orders. Real jobs, real neighbors, everything normal. Elena let out a shaky laugh. You don't know how to be normal? Then I'll learn. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but Adrian, if we're doing this, if we're really starting over, we do it completely. No halfway. No keeping one foot in your old world. I know. That means no money from your accounts. They can trace that. No contacts from your organization. No favors from people who owe you. Her voice was steel wrapped in softness. We start with nothing. Adrian thought about the offshore accounts, the cash reserves, the network of resources he'd spent 15 years building. Walking away from power was one thing. Walking away from the safety net that came with it was another. But then Gabriel made a small sound and Adrian looked down at his son. Nothing it is, he said. Elena stood, moved carefully to the bedroom. I'll pack. But Adrian, we're going to need at least some money to get started. Rent, deposits, basic supplies. I have cash. He'd withdrawn $50,000 that morning, before the meeting. Emergency money, untraceable. It'll get us through the first few months. She paused in the doorway. After that I get a job. Doing what? Adrian smiled grimly. I'll figure it out. Matt. They left at 2 a.m. Adrian carried Gabriel while Elena managed 2 duffel bags stuffed with clothes, documents, and the few possessions she couldn't leave behind. Books, mostly. A photo album. A small wooden box that she didn't explain and Adrian didn't ask about. The car was new, purchased that afternoon with cash from a private seller who didn't ask questions. A 5-year-old Honda Civic, unremarkable and reliable. Adrian had ditched the Audi in a long-term airport lot, keys in the ignition, an invitation for someone to make it disappear. He'd also ditched his phone. Both phones, actually, the personal one and the encrypted one his organization used. Crushed them under his heel in an alley, dropped the pieces in 3 different dumpsters. Elena had done the same with hers. No phones meant no tracking. It also meant no safety net. The city receded in the rearview mirror as Adrian drove north on the interstate. Elena sat in the passenger seat, Gabriel's car seat secured between them in the back. She stared out the window, watching the lights fade. Are you okay? Adrian asked. I don't know, she admitted. I spent 8 months convincing myself I'd never see you again, that I'd made my choice and had to live with it. And now, she gestured vaguely, now you're here and we're running away together, and it feels like a dream. Not a dream, Adrian said. This is real. I know, That's what scares me. They drove in silence for a while. Gabriel slept. The highway stretched empty before them, illuminated by the Civic's headlights and nothing else. Where exactly are we going? Elena finally asked. Pennsylvania. Small town called Millbrook. Population around 3,000. No major industry, mostly residential. Tourist traffic in the fall for the leaves, dead the rest of the year. How do you know about it? Adrian's hands tightened on the wheel. I had a safe house there, years ago, before I met you. Just a cabin in the woods, nothing fancy, but it was mine, bought under a different name, off the books. No one in the organization knew about it. You had an escape plan. Everyone needs an escape plan. Elena was quiet for a moment. Is the cabin still there? Should be. I've been paying the property taxes through a trust. As far as anyone knows, it belongs to a retiree who died 5 years ago. And you're sure no one knows about it? As sure as I can be. Which wasn't the same as certain, but it was the best they had. Elena nodded, settled back in her seat. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her. Her breathing evened out, her head tilted against the window. Adrian drove through the night, his mind racing even as the highway blurred past. He'd made the right choice. He knew that. But rightness didn't erase doubt. What did he know about being a father, about living a normal life? He'd spent 15 years cultivating power, intimidation, control. Those skills didn't translate to changing diapers or paying bills or being someone Gabriel could look up to. And Elena, she'd said she loved him, but was that the truth? Or just the emotion of the moment? She'd left once. What would stop her from leaving again when she realized the man who'd walked away from an empire didn't know how to exist without one? The questions gnawed at him until dawn broke pink and gold across the horizon. They reached Millbrook just before noon. The town was exactly as Adrian remembered, small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business but pretended not to. Main Street consisted of a diner, a hardware store, a post office, and a bar that had been there since Prohibition. American flags hung from porches. Pickup trucks outnumbered sedans 3-1. Adrian drove through town without stopping, headed for the woods that bordered the eastern edge. The road turned from asphalt to gravel, then from gravel to dirt. Trees closed in on either side, oak, maple, pine, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into golden fragments. The cabin appeared after 2 miles of rough road. It was smaller than Adrian remembered, but intact. Wood siding weathered to gray. A stone chimney. A covered porch with 2 rocking chairs. The windows were shuttered, the yard overgrown, but the structure looked sound. Adrian parked, killed the engine. Silence flooded in, so complete after hours of highway noise that it felt oppressive. "This is it?" Elena asked, staring at the cabin. "This is it. It's rustic." "It's isolated," Adrian corrected, "which is the point." Elena climbed out carefully, still moving like someone recovering from childbirth. Adrian retrieved Gabriel, who was awake now and fussing quietly. Together, they approached the cabin. The key was where Adrian had left it, buried in a tobacco tin under the third porch step. The lock was stiff from disuse, but it turned. The door swung open with a creak. Inside smelled like dust and thyme. Furniture sat shrouded under white sheets. The kitchen area held a wood stove, a hand-pump sink, open shelving stocked with canned goods that had probably expired years ago. The main room featured a stone fireplace, a worn couch, a table with 2 chairs. A ladder led to a loft that served as the bedroom. It was nothing like the penthouse Adrian had left behind. Elena set the duffel bags down, looked around with an expression Adrian couldn't read. "There's no electricity," she observed. "Generator out back. Needs gas, but it works." "Running water?" "Well pump. Water's cold, but it's clean." "Heat?" Adrian gestured to the fireplace. "And the wood stove." Elena turned to him. "Adrian, we have a newborn. He needs—" "I know." Adrian cut her off gently. "This is temporary. Just until I can find work, get us a real place in town. But for now, it's safe. No one knows we're here. No one can find us." Elena looked like she wanted to argue. Then Gabriel let out a wail, and the argument died. Priorities shifted. "He needs to eat," she said, "and I need to lie down." "There's a mattress in the loft, clean sheets in that trunk." Adrian pointed. I'll get the generator running, bring in the supplies. Elena nodded, took Gabriel from him. Her fingers brushed his, and for a moment they just stood there. Two people who'd blown up their lives for a chance at something that might not even exist. Thank you, Elena whispered, for doing this. Adrian wanted to say he wasn't doing it for thanks, that he was doing it because he had no other choice, that walking away from his son was impossible the moment he'd held him. But what came out was simpler. You're welcome. The first week was brutal. Adrian had lived rough before. His early years hadn't been soft. But that was 2 decades ago. His body had grown accustomed to luxury, climate control, hot water on demand, food prepared by people who understood seasoning. The cabin offered none of that. The generator worked but guzzled gas. Adrian rationed its use. 2 hours in the morning, 2 in the evening. The rest of the time, they relied on candles and daylight. The well pump required priming and produced water so cold it made teeth ache. The wood stove heated efficiently but demanded constant feeding. Gabriel, meanwhile, required everything. Adrian learned that newborns didn't sleep so much as nap in unpredictable intervals. That crying could mean hunger, discomfort, tiredness, or absolutely nothing discernible. That diapers were a losing battle and formula had to be measured precisely, or Gabriel would spit up everything. He learned that exhaustion came in layers, physical, mental, emotional, and that coffee was insufficient but necessary. Elena was patient with his fumbling, but she was struggling too. Her body needed rest, and Gabriel refused to provide it. She'd wake every 2 hours to nurse, her face drawn with pain and fatigue. Sometimes Adrian would find her crying silently in the loft, Gabriel asleep against her chest, and he'd sit beside her without speaking until the tears stopped. They didn't talk about the life they'd left behind. They didn't talk about the future beyond the next day. They just survived. On the 8th day, Adrian drove into town. He needed supplies, formula, diapers, gas for the generator, food that wasn't canned. He left Elena and Gabriel at the cabin with strict instructions to stay inside, bar the door, and not answer for anyone. Millbrook's general store was run by a woman named Maggie, 70s, gray hair pulled into a practical bun, eyes that missed nothing. She looked up when Adrian entered, her gaze sweeping over him in assessment. "Help you?" she asked. "Just shopping," Adrian replied, keeping his voice neutral. He moved through the aisles collecting items. Maggie watched from behind the counter, not bothering to hide her curiosity. When Adrian brought his purchases to the register, she rang them up with practiced efficiency. "Don't recognize you," she said conversationally. "Passing through?" "Staying for a while," Adrian answered. "Whereabouts?" "The old Kershaw place, out on Ridge Road." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "The cabin's been empty for years. Didn't know anyone still owned it." "I'm renting," Adrian lied smoothly. "Huh." She bagged his items. "Bit isolated for most folks, especially with a baby." Adrian's hand stilled on his wallet. "What makes you think I have a baby?" Maggie gestured to the pile of diapers, formula, and baby wipes on the counter. "Call it a hunch." Adrian forced a smile. "My wife and I like the quiet." "I'm sure you do." Maggie handed him the bags. "Word of advice, though? If you're planning to stay, you'll want to introduce yourselves proper. Small towns talk, and strangers make people nervous. Better to be neighborly than mysterious." But it was good advice, but Adrian had no intention of following it. Neighborly meant visible. Visible meant vulnerable. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. Back at the cabin, he found Elena sitting on the porch, Gabriel cradled in her arms. She looked better, rested, color returning to her face. "How was town?" she asked. "Small," Adrian replied, setting the bags down. "People are curious." "Did anyone ask questions?" "The store owner. I told her we're renting." Elena nodded. "We need to figure out our story. If people start asking, we need to have answers that match." She was right. Adrian settled into the rocking chair beside her. "All right, we're married. That's simple enough. Names?" "Nothing too different from our real ones," Elena suggested. "Easier to remember. How about Alex and Ella Morgan?" "Morgan works." Adrian tested the name in his mind. Alex Morgan. It fit well enough. "I'm a mechanic. You're a freelance editor. We moved here for the quiet, to raise our son away from the city." "Which city?" "Baltimore. Big enough to be believable. Far enough that no one will have connections. Elena smiled faintly. Look at you building a cover story. I built a few in my time. Her smile faded. Adrian, Alex, we need to talk about money. How much do we have left? Adrian had been avoiding that calculation. After supplies, maybe 38,000. That'll last us 6 months if we're careful. Less if we rent an actual apartment. I'll find work. Doing what? You just said you're a mechanic. Are you actually a mechanic? I know cars, Adrian said defensively. I can learn the rest. Elena looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Gabriel chose that moment to fuss, and she stood, swaying gently. He needs to eat. Can you get the formula ready? Adrian nodded, heading inside. As he measured powder and warmed water, he heard Elena singing softly on the porch. A lullaby in Spanish, her voice cracked but sweet. It was the most peaceful sound he'd heard in years. Mama. 3 days later, Adrian walked into Millbrook's only auto repair shop. It was a 2-bay garage attached to a gas station, run by a man named Frank, mid-50s, permanently oil-stained, with the build of someone who'd worked with his hands his entire life. He looked up from an engine block when Adrian entered. Help you? Frank asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm looking for work, Adrian said. I'm good with cars. Frank's eyes narrowed. You got experience? Rebuilt 3 engines from scratch. Can handle bodywork, electrical, diagnostics. I'm a fast learner. You local? Just moved here, cabin on Ridge Road. Frank grunted. The Kershaw place. Heard someone was squatting there. Renting, Adrian corrected. Sure you are. Frank studied him. What's your name? Alex Morgan. Well, Alex Morgan, I don't usually hire people off the street, but he gestured to the cluttered garage. I'm drowning in work. My last guy quit 3 weeks ago, moved to Pittsburgh. If you're half as good as you say, I could use the help. What's the pay? $15 an hour, cash, no benefits. You work when I need you, which is most days. It was a fraction of what Adrian used to make in an hour. He'd once spent more than $15 on a single cup of coffee. I'll take it, Adrian said. Frank extended an oil-stained hand. When can you start? Tomorrow. They shook on it. Thumb. Adrian returned to the cabin feeling something unfamiliar. Pride in honest work earned, not taken. Elena was inside, folding clothes she'd washed by hand in the sink. Gabriel slept in a makeshift bassinet Adrian had fashioned from a drawer and blankets. I got a job, Adrian announced. Elena looked up, genuine surprise crossing her face. Already? Auto shop in town. 15 an hour. It's not much, but Elena crossed the room, wrapped her arms around him. It's everything. Adrian held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, still lavender, even here. We're going to be okay, he said. I know. Elena pulled back, looked up at him. Because we have each other. And for the first time since Gabriel was born, Adrian believed it might actually be true. But that night, lying in the loft with Elena curled beside him and Gabriel sleeping nearby, Adrian's phone, the burner he'd bought in town, buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. We need to talk. M. Marco. Adrian stared at the message, his pulse quickening. He'd covered his tracks, changed names, ditched devices, disappeared completely. So how the hell had Marco found him? He deleted the text, powered off the phone, and lay awake until dawn, listening to Gabriel breathe, feeling the fragile peace he'd built start to crack. Adrian didn't tell Elena about the text. He told himself it was to protect her, to keep her from worrying. But the truth was simpler and more selfish. He didn't want to see the fear return to her eyes. Didn't want to watch the fragile peace they'd built shatter before it had a chance to take root. So he buried the phone in the woods behind the cabin, marked the spot with a stone, and tried to pretend Marco's message had never existed. The work at Frank's garage became Adrian's anchor to normal life. He showed up at 7 each morning when frost still clung to the grass and the town was barely awake. Frank would already be there, coffee in hand, surveying the day's work with the resigned expression of a man who knew he'd never catch up. Morning, Alex, Frank would grunt, and Adrian would respond in kind, and they'd fall into the rhythm of work that required hands more than words. Adrian discovered he was good at this. Better than good. His mind, trained to see patterns, to solve problems, to break down complex systems into manageable parts, translated perfectly to engine diagnostics. A misfire wasn't so different from a territorial dispute. Both required identifying the source, understanding the cascade of failures, and implementing a solution before everything fell apart. Within 2 weeks, Frank stopped supervising him. Within 3, customers started requesting him specifically. "That new guy really knows his stuff," Adrian overheard one afternoon, a farmer whose truck he'd just resurrected from the dead. Fixed what 3 other mechanics couldn't figure out. Frank beamed like a proud father. "Told you I had an eye for talent." The money was steady, if modest. Adrian brought home his cash wages each Friday, and Elena would count it carefully, dividing it into envelopes marked rent, food, savings, emergency. She ran their household like a military operation, stretching every dollar until it screamed. "We have enough for a security deposit," she announced one evening, 3 weeks after they'd arrived. "If we're careful, we could afford a small apartment in town, something with heat and running water." Adrian looked around the cabin, at the wood stove that required constant attention, at the pump sink that froze if the temperature dropped below 30, at the loft where they all slept together because it was the only warm space when the fire burned low. "Let's wait another month," he said. "Build up the savings a bit more." Elena studied him. "You like it here?" "It's growing on me." "Liar." But she smiled. "You like that no one can find us." She wasn't wrong. The cabin's isolation had become a comfort. Each day that passed without incident, without Marco appearing at the door or strange cars on the road, was a day Adrian allowed himself to believe this might actually work. Gabriel was growing, changing daily in ways that astonished Adrian. The unfocused newborn stare had sharpened into awareness. He could track faces now, could smile, though the books Elena borrowed from the town library insisted it was probably gas. His cries had developed distinct tones that Adrian was learning to interpret. The sharp wail meant hunger. The building whimper meant a diaper. The specific fussy cry that started around sunset meant exhaustion fighting against the need to be held. Adrian became an expert in that last one. Most evenings, he'd walk the cabin's small interior with Gabriel against his shoulder, humming tuneless sounds while Elena prepared their simple dinner. Sometimes Gabriel would fall asleep within minutes. Other times he'd fight it for an hour, his tiny body rigid with inexplicable infant rage. "You're better at this than I am," Elena observed one night, watching Adrian pace with their son. "I'm just more stubborn than he is." "No." Elena's voice was soft. "You're patient. I never knew you could be patient." Adrian thought about the meetings he'd run with an iron fist, the subordinates he'd cut off mid-sentence, the world he'd expected to bend to his schedule. "I'm learning." Gabriel finally surrendered to sleep, his small body going limp with the suddenness of exhaustion's victory. Adrian laid him carefully in the bassinet, covering him with a blanket Elena had knitted from yard sale yarn. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, rice and beans stretched with vegetables from the discount bin at Maggie's store. It wasn't the food Adrian was accustomed to, but it was warm and filling, and Elena had cooked it, which made it better than any meal he could remember. "Frank asked about you today," Adrian said, wiping his bowl with bread. "What about me?" "Wanted to know if my wife might be interested in bookkeeping work. His records are a mess, and tax season's coming." Elena's eyes lit up. "Really?" "I told him you'd think about it." Adrian paused. "But Elena, it would mean coming into town, being visible, meeting people." The light dimmed slightly. "I know. We agreed to stay low. We also agreed to build a life." Elena set down her fork. "Adrian, we can't hide forever. At some point, we have to start living like actual people, not fugitives. We are fugitives. Only if someone's chasing us." She reached across the table, took his hand. "It's been almost a month. No one's come. No one's asking questions beyond normal small-town curiosity. Maybe we actually made it." Adrian wanted to believe her, but the memory of Marco's text burned in his mind like a brand. "1 more month," he said. "We give it 1 more month of quiet. If nothing happens, you can take the bookkeeping work. We can rent an apartment. We can—" He struggled for the word. "We can settle." Elena squeezed his hand. 1 more month, she agreed. That night, Adrian dreamed of the city, of the penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows, of men kneeling before him, their faces blank with fear, of power that fit like a second skin, so familiar he'd forgotten what it felt like to live without it. He woke in the dark loft, heart pounding, Elena breathing softly beside him. Gabriel made small sleeping sounds from the bassinet. The cabin creaked in the wind. This was real. Everything else was just ghosts. The next morning, Adrian found fresh tire tracks in the dirt road leading to the cabin. He noticed them while hauling water from the well, two parallel lines pressed into mud still soft from the previous night's rain. They ran from the main road to a point about 50 yards from the cabin, then turned around. Someone had driven here. Stopped, turned back. Adrian's blood turned to ice. He finished filling the water buckets with mechanical precision, his mind cataloging possibilities. Lost tourist, wrong turn, innocent mistake, or reconnaissance. He carried the water inside, keeping his expression neutral. Elena was nursing Gabriel by the stove, wrapped in the thick robe she'd bought at the church thrift store. "Morning," she said, smiling. "Coffee's almost ready." "I need to run into town early," Adrian said casually. "Frank's got a rush job." It was a lie, and Elena knew it. Her smile faltered. "Adrian, it's fine," he interrupted gently. "Just work. I'll be back by lunch." He kissed her forehead, kissed Gabriel's downy head, and left before she could press. The burner phone was where he'd buried it, wrapped in plastic to protect it from moisture. Adrian powered it on with hands that didn't shake only through force of will. No new messages. He called Marco's number. It rang 4 times, then went to a generic voicemail. Adrian hung up without leaving a message, then immediately dialed again. This time Marco answered on the second ring. "Took you long enough," Marco said. "How did you find me?" Adrian's voice was flat, dangerous. "I didn't." "Not exactly." Marco sighed. "I'm not calling to bring you back, Adrian. I'm calling to warn you." Every muscle in Adrian's body tensed. "About what?" "Santini's making moves. He never liked you stepping down, and he's been consolidating power, calling in favors, making alliances. 2 days ago, he put out feelers, quiet ones, asking if anyone knew where you went." "Why?" "Because he's smart enough to know you didn't just vanish. Men like you don't disappear without a reason." Marco's voice dropped. "He thinks you've got leverage. Files, maybe. Evidence, something you're holding over the organization in case anyone comes after you." Adrian's jaw clenched. "I have nothing. I walked away clean." "I know that. You know that. But Santini's paranoid, and paranoia makes men dangerous. He's convinced himself that the only way he's truly secure is if you're—" Marco paused. "Not a problem anymore." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Has he found me?" Adrian asked. "Not yet, but he's looking. I wanted to give you a head start." "Why?" Adrian's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Why help me?" "Because you gave me this position. Because you trusted me when you didn't have to." Marco's voice roughened with something that might have been loyalty or might have been regret. "And because I know what you gave up to walk away. I'm not going to let Santini destroy that." Adrian closed his eyes. "What's my move?" "Keep your head down, don't make waves, and for the love of everything, don't do anything that puts you on anyone's radar." Marco paused. "How's the kid?" The question surprised Adrian. "Good, growing." "And the woman?" "Elena. Her name is Elena." "Right. Elena." Marco cleared his throat. "Look, I can't promise Santini won't find you eventually, but I can buy you time. Keep him pointed in wrong directions. Just be ready to run if you have to." "I'm done running." "Then be ready to fight." Marco's voice was grim. "And Adrian, if it comes to that, don't hesitate. Men who hesitate die, and you've got people depending on you now." The call ended. Adrian stood in the woods, phone in hand, the morning sun filtering through bare branches. He thought about the cabin, about Elena singing to Gabriel, about the simple life they were building from nothing. Then he thought about Santini. Ambitious, ruthless, and now convinced Adrian was a threat that needed eliminating. Marco was right. This wasn't over. It had never been over. Adrian smashed the phone against a rock, scattered the pieces, and headed back to the cabin to tell Elena they needed to leave. But when he emerged from the woods, a car was parked in front of the cabin. Not Santini's black SUV or a convoy of soldiers, Just a beat-up Ford pickup with local plates, the kind every third person in Millbrook drove. Frank stood on the porch, knocking. Adrian forced himself to walk normally, to breathe normally, to not look like a man who just learned his past was hunting him. "Frank," he called. "What's going on?" Frank turned, relief crossing his weathered face. "There you are. I came by to—" He stopped, actually seeing Adrian for the first time. "Jesus, Alex, you look like you've seen a ghost. You all right?" "Fine," Adrian lied. "Just surprised to see you here." "Yeah, sorry for dropping by unannounced. I tried calling, but—" Frank gestured vaguely. "I figured you probably don't have great cell service out here." They didn't have cell service at all, but Adrian just nodded. The cabin door opened. Elena appeared, Gabriel in her arms, her expression carefully neutral. "Can I help you?" Frank's face brightened. "You must be Alex's wife." "Frank Dennison. I run the garage where your husband works." He extended a hand. Elena shifted Gabriel carefully and shook it. "Ella Morgan. Nice to meet you." "I apologize for the intrusion, ma'am, but I've got a situation. Big job came in, fleet vehicle for the county, needs to be done by Monday or we lose the contract. It's more than I can handle alone, even with Alex's help." Frank looked between them. "I know it's the weekend, but I'm hoping I can steal your husband for a few hours. Overtime pay, time and a half." Elena looked at Adrian. Something passed between them, a question, a concern, a decision made in the space between heartbeats. "Of course," Elena said, smiling. "We can use the extra money." "You're a saint, Mrs. Morgan." Frank tipped his cap. "I'll have him back by dinner." Adrian kissed Elena quickly, whispered, "Lock the doors," against her hair, and followed Frank to the truck. As they drove toward town, Frank chatted about the county job, about the weather, about his daughter who was pregnant with his first grandchild. Adrian made appropriate sounds, but his mind was elsewhere. The tire tracks, Marco's warning, Santini's search, and now Frank, showing up at the cabin, bringing Adrian into town where he'd be visible, exposed. Paranoia whispered that it wasn't coincidence. But when they reached the garage and Frank immediately started pulling engine parts, explaining the problem with the genuine frustration of a man drowning in work, Adrian's suspicions eased. Sometimes a job was just a job. They worked through the afternoon. Adrian's hands moved with practiced efficiency, removing, repairing, replacing. The work was meditative, requiring enough focus to quiet his racing thoughts, but not so much that he couldn't plan. They needed to leave Millbrook, tonight, if possible. Take only what they could carry, abandon everything else, disappear deeper into nowhere. But where? How far would they have to run before Santini stopped looking? And what kind of life was that for Gabriel? Always moving, always hiding, never settling. "You're awful quiet today," Frank observed around 4 o'clock. "Everything okay at home?" "Fine," Adrian said automatically. "Uh-huh." Frank didn't sound convinced. He wiped his hands, grabbed 2 sodas from the ancient vending machine in the corner, tossed one to Adrian. "Look, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've been around enough to recognize when a man's carrying weight he's not talking about." Adrian took a long drink, buying time. "Just thinking about the future, making sure I can provide for my family." "You're doing fine, better than fine. You're the best mechanic I've had in 10 years. Frank leaned against the workbench. "But I get the sense you're not planning to stick around." Adrian met his gaze. "What makes you say that?" "The way you look over your shoulder, the way your wife barely comes to town, the fact that you're living in a cabin with no heat and a newborn when you've clearly got skills that could land you work anywhere." Frank's voice was gentle, not accusing. "You're running from something." Adrian's hand tightened on the soda can. "That's a hell of an assumption." "It's an observation. And I'm not judging." Frank took a sip of his drink. "I did some running myself back in the day. Different reasons, different circumstances, but I know the look." They stood in silence for a moment, the garage filled with the smell of oil and old concrete. "If you need to leave," Frank said finally, "I get it. But if you're looking for a place to stop running, Millbrook's as good as any. People here don't pry. We take care of our own. And if you're willing to put down roots, you'd be welcome." Adrian's throat tightened unexpectedly. "I appreciate that. Just think about it." Frank pushed off the bench. "Now, Let's finish this damn engine before we both lose our weekend. They worked until sunset, until the county vehicle was purring like it had just rolled off the factory floor. Frank paid Adrian in cash, $150 that felt earned in a way money never had before. Same time Monday? Frank asked as Adrian headed for his car. Adrian thought about Marco's warning, about the tire tracks, about Santini somewhere out there, hunting. Yeah, he said, Monday. When Adrian returned to the cabin, full dark had fallen. The windows glowed with candlelight. Elena had lit every candle they owned, turning the small space into something almost magical. She met him at the door, Gabriel asleep against her shoulder. We need to talk, she said. Adrian's stomach dropped. About what? About what's scaring you. Elena's voice was calm but firm. You've been different since this morning, tense, watching the woods like you expect someone to come out of them. What happened? Adrian closed the door, locked it, checked the windows. Then he told her everything. Marco's call, Santini's search, the impossible choice they were facing. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I want to keep you safe, both of you. That's not what I asked. Elena shifted Gabriel to her other shoulder. Do you want to run again? Keep moving until we're so deep in hiding that we might as well not exist? Or do you want to stay and fight for the life we're building? Fighting means risk. Living means risk. Elena's eyes were fierce. I spent 8 months hiding, Adrian. 8 months being afraid of every shadow, every stranger. I'm tired of being afraid. I want Gabriel to grow up somewhere, to have friends, to go to school, to be a kid. And I want... Her voice broke slightly. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. Adrian pulled her close, careful of Gabriel between them. If we stay, and Santini finds us, then we deal with it, together. Elena looked up at him. You're not the man you were, Adrian. You've changed, but you're still strong, still capable, and you're not alone anymore. You're asking me to bet our lives on the possibility that we can win. I'm asking you to bet our lives on us. Elena's voice was steady, certain. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you walked into my bookstore 3 years ago and pretended to be interested in Dickens. I left you to protect our son, and it nearly killed me. I won't leave you again. So we stay, and we build our life, and if trouble comes, we face it. Adrian rested his forehead against hers. You're either the bravest person I know or the craziest. Both, Elena said, smiling through tears. Definitely both. Gabriel stirred between them, making small sounds of protest at being squeezed. They laughed, pulled apart, and Adrian took his son carefully. All right, he said. We stay. But we do it smart. I'll talk to Marco again, get better intel on Santini's movements. We'll set up contingencies, escape routes, warning systems. If danger gets close, we're gone immediately. No debate. Agreed. Elena wiped her eyes. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we live. Adrian looked down at Gabriel, at his son's perfect face. Really live, not just survive. Elena moved to the small table, picked up an envelope. Then you should know, I accepted Frank's offer. I start doing his bookkeeping on Monday. Adrian's eyes widened. When did... He stopped by while you were working, brought the job offer in writing, very formal. Elena's smile was mischievous. I told him my husband and I would discuss it, but I had a feeling you'd agree. Did you? You're trying to build a life here, Adrian. I can see it. The way you talk about the garage, about Frank, about the work. You're not just hiding anymore. You're becoming someone new. She crossed to him, put her hand on his chest. Someone I'm excited to know. Adrian kissed her then, long and deep, tasting salt from her tears and hope from her smile. When they broke apart, Gabriel was awake and fussing. Someone needs dinner, Elena said. And someone needs a diaper change, Adrian added, wrinkling his nose. They fell into the routine they'd developed, Elena preparing formula, while Adrian changed Gabriel on the makeshift changing station they'd built from a dresser drawer and a towel. It was domestic and mundane and nothing like the life Adrian had lived. It was perfect. Later, after Gabriel had eaten and fallen back asleep, after they'd banked the fire and blown out most of the candles, Adrian and Elena lay together in the loft. Do you miss it? Elena asked quietly. The power, the control, the respect? Adrian thought about it honestly. Sometimes, not the violence or the fear, but the certainty, knowing exactly who I was, what I was capable of, what role I played. That was, he searched for the word, comfortable. And now? Now I'm figuring it out, learning who Alex Morgan is, what kind of father he wants to be, what kind of man. Adrian pulled her closer. It's harder, scarier, but it's real in a way nothing else has ever been. Elena was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you. The words hit Adrian harder than any insult or threat ever had. Why? Because you chose the hard thing, the uncertain thing. You chose us over everything you knew. She kissed his jaw. That takes more courage than ruling an empire ever did. Adrian held her until her breathing evened into sleep. Then he lay awake, listening to the sounds of his family, Elena's soft breaths, Gabriel's occasional sighs, the cabin creaking in the wind. Somewhere out there, Santini was searching. Marco was buying time. The life Adrian had left behind was refusing to let him go. But here, in this moment, he had everything that mattered, and he would burn down anyone who tried to take it away. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Adrian was outside chopping firewood, a task that had become both necessity and meditation, when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. He set down the axe, wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cold, and watched as two vehicles approached. Not SUVs, not Santini's men. A minivan and a sedan, both weathered by years in use. They parked, and people emerged. Frank and his wife, a woman named Carol with kind eyes and graying hair. Another couple Adrian recognized from the garage. Bill, who owned the hardware store, and his husband Marcus. And Maggie from the general store, carrying what looked like a casserole dish. Elena appeared at the cabin door, Gabriel in her arms, her expression uncertain. Frank approached with a smile. Morning, Alex. Hope we're not intruding. That depends on what you're doing here, Adrian said carefully. Well, Frank gestured to the group. Carol and I were talking, and we realized, here you are, new family in town, living way out here with a newborn, probably haven't had a decent meal in weeks. So we organized a little welcome. More like Carol organized it, Maggie interjected, moving toward the cabin. But we all agreed Millbrook could use some new blood, and the best way to make people feel welcome is to show up with food. Carol carried a box of groceries. Bill and Marcus had a portable heater. Frank had a toolbox. We figured, Carol said gently, addressing Elena, that you might appreciate some help winterizing this place. It's going to get cold soon, and with a baby, we couldn't possibly, Elena started. You absolutely can, Maggie interrupted, already setting up the casserole in the kitchen. This is what we do here. We take care of each other, so stop arguing and let us help. What followed was the strangest few hours of Adrian's life. These people, practical strangers, descended on the cabin with the efficiency of a military operation. Frank and Bill reinforced the window frames, added weather stripping, checked the chimney flue. Marcus set up the heater in the loft and showed Adrian how to position it for maximum efficiency without creating a fire hazard. The women clustered in the kitchen, cooking, organizing, and interrogating Elena with the friendly ruthlessness of people who meant well but wouldn't take no for an answer. How long have you been married? Carol asked. 4 years, Elena answered, the lie smooth and practiced. And you moved here from Baltimore? Maggie added, unpacking groceries into the cabin's limited storage. Yes, we wanted somewhere quieter, better for raising Gabriel. Smart, Carol smiled. Cities are no place for children. Too much noise, too many strangers. Adrian worked alongside Frank, hyper-aware of every question, every probe. But the interrogation never came. Just normal conversation, normal curiosity, the kind of questions people asked because they cared, not because they suspected. By noon, the cabin had been transformed. The windows no longer leaked cold air. The loft had a heater that would keep Gabriel warm through winter. The kitchen held enough food to last 2 weeks, and Adrian and Elena had been welcomed into a community they'd never asked to join. Thank you, Elena said as the group prepared to leave. Her voice was thick with emotion. You didn't have to do any of this. Of course we did, Carol said, hugging her carefully around Gabriel. You're one of us now. When they were gone, Adrian and Elena stood in the cabin, surrounded by the evidence of kindness they hadn't expected and didn't know how to process. "They think we belong here," Elena whispered. "Maybe we do," Adrian replied. And for the first time since leaving the city, he almost believed it. 3 weeks of peace felt like a lifetime, and an eye blink all at once. Adrian fell into rhythms he'd never imagined, waking before dawn to start the fire, warming bottles for Gabriel's early feeding, driving to the garage as the sun painted frost pink across the fields. The work became second nature. His hands learned the language of engines, the logic of mechanical systems that didn't lie or betray or scheme for power. Elena transformed the cabin into something that resembled a home. She hung curtains made from fabric scraps Maggie had donated, organized their meager belongings into coherent systems, even planted herb seedlings and coffee cans on the windowsill despite the approaching winter. Every Friday, she went to Frank's garage with Gabriel strapped to her chest, spending 3 hours sorting through receipts and invoices while the baby dozed against her heartbeat. The town embraced them with the uncomplicated warmth of people who believed in second chances without needing to know what came first. Carol invited them to Sunday dinner. Bill offered Adrian first pick from estate sales where tools could be bought for pennies. Marcus taught Elena how to preserve vegetables from the community garden's autumn harvest. Maggie kept a running tab at the general store, waving away concerns about payment with gruff affection. "You'll pay it forward someday," she'd said. "That's how it works here." Gabriel grew with the alarming speed of infants who refused to stay small. His eyes lost their newborn vagueness, focusing now with clear intent. He could track voices, turn toward sounds, and his smiles, real smiles, not gas, came more frequently. Adrian would spend entire evenings holding him, watching expressions flit across his tiny face, marveling at the impossibility of loving something this much. "He looks like you when you concentrate," Elena observed one night. She was doing Frank's books at the table, Gabriel asleep in a basket beside her. "Same furrow between the eyebrows." Adrian glanced up from the engine manual he was studying. "I don't furrow." "You absolutely furrow." Elena smiled without looking up from her ledger. "You're doing it right now." The domesticity should have felt foreign. Adrian had built his life on adrenaline and control, on making decisions that moved millions of dollars and ended lives. Quiet evenings with paperwork and baby sounds should have felt like a prison. Instead, it felt like freedom. But the past never stays buried when you've buried it shallow. The call came on a Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Adrian was under a Chevy Silverado, replacing a rusted exhaust system, when Frank appeared beside the lift. "Alex, you got a minute?" Something in Frank's tone made Adrian's instincts flare. He rolled out from under the truck, wiped his hands. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly." Frank's expression was troubled. "But there's a guy at the counter asking for you. Says he's an old friend from Baltimore." Every muscle in Adrian's body went taut. "What does he look like?" "Expensive suit, city haircut, driving a BMW with Maryland plates." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't look like any friend of yours I'd imagine." Adrian's mind raced through possibilities. Marco wouldn't come himself, too risky. Santini wouldn't announce himself, too obvious, which meant this was either a scout or someone else entirely. "Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes," Adrian said. "And Frank? Stay close to the counter." Frank studied him for a long moment. "This the trouble you've been running from?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." "You need backup. You say the word." Frank's hand moved to his belt, where Adrian suddenly realized he carried more than just tools. "I don't know what your story is, Alex, and I don't need to. But you're one of ours now. That means something." The simple loyalty hit Adrian harder than it should have. "Thank you, but let me handle this." He washed his hands quickly, checking his reflection in the scratched bathroom mirror. The man looking back was different from the one who'd ruled the city 3 months ago. Leaner from physical labor. Weathered from outdoor work, hair longer, less styled. He looked like Alex Morgan, mechanic. But his eyes were still Adrian Moretti's eyes. The man waiting at the counter was young, maybe 25, with the polished look of someone who spent more on his watch than most people spent on rent. He smiled when Adrian emerged, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "Alex Morgan?" he asked, extending a hand. Adrian didn't take it. "Do I know you?" "Not personally, no. but we have mutual acquaintances. The man's smile widened. My name is David Chen. I'm an attorney with Whitmore and Associates. I've been trying to reach you about a legal matter. Every instinct screamed trap, but Adrian kept his expression neutral. I don't have any legal matters. Actually, you do. David pulled an envelope from his briefcase. You've been named as a beneficiary in an estate settlement. I've been authorized to deliver these documents personally and answer any questions you might have. Adrian stared at the envelope like it might bite. Whose estate? A woman named Margaret Kershaw. I believe you knew her? The name meant nothing to Adrian. He'd never heard it before, which meant this was either elaborate misdirection or someone had done their research on the cabin's previous owner. I didn't know any Margaret Kershaw, Adrian said carefully. According to our records, you've been residing in property formerly owned by Mrs. Kershaw. She passed away 5 years ago, and her estate has been in probate. As the current resident, you're entitled to certain considerations regarding the property. David set the envelope on the counter. I just need you to sign acknowledging receipt of the documents. It was too clean, too convenient. Adrian's mind cataloged the angles. If this was Santini, the signature would confirm his location. If it was legitimate, refusing would raise questions he couldn't afford. Frank appeared from the back, tool in hand, positioning himself strategically. How did you find me? Adrian asked. Property tax records. They list a trust as the owner, but the trust administrator provided information about the current occupant. David's smile never wavered. It's all standard estate law, Mr. Morgan. Nothing sinister. Adrian took the envelope, opened it. Inside were legal documents, dense paragraphs of whereas and heretofore, official stamps, notarized signatures. It looked legitimate, but legitimacy could be manufactured. I'll need to review these with my own attorney, Adrian said. Of course. David produced a business card. My contact information. Feel free to call with any questions. The estate isn't going anywhere. He left with the same polished smile he'd arrived with, climbing into his BMW and disappearing down Main Street. Frank waited until the car was out of sight. That what I think it was? I don't know what it was. Adrian stared at the documents, seeing threats in every paragraph. But I need to find out. He called Marco that night from a payphone outside the diner using a calling card he'd bought with cash. Marco answered on the first ring. Please tell me you're not calling from your location. I'm not, but I need information. Adrian described the attorney's visit, the documents, everything. Marco was quiet for a long moment. I'll check it out. But Adrian, if someone sent a lawyer, they're not looking to kill you. They're looking to confirm where you are, which means you don't have much time. How much? If it's Santini, days, maybe less. Marco's voice was grim. He's been getting desperate. The organization is fracturing without you. People are choosing sides, and Santini's paranoia is making him sloppy. He's convinced you're planning a return, that you're gathering support to take back control. That's insane. I walked away. You know that. I know that. But Santini sees threats everywhere. Marco paused. There's something else. He's hired outside contractors, professionals, not our people. Adrian's blood ran cold. Outside contractors meant no loyalty, no lines they wouldn't cross. It meant Elena and Gabriel were no longer hypothetically at risk. They were actively targeted. What's my move? Adrian asked. Run. Tonight. Disappear deeper. Change names again. Burn every connection. I can't keep running. Then you fight. But Adrian, if you fight, you're pulling these people into your war. That town, those neighbors who've been helping you, they'll become collateral damage. Adrian thought about Frank, about Carol and Maggie and Bill and Marcus, about the community that had welcomed them without questions, that had shown them kindness when they had expected nothing. There has to be another way, Adrian said. There isn't. Not with men like Santini. Marco's voice softened. I'm sorry. I've been doing what I can to slow him down, but I can't protect you from here. You need to make a choice. Adrian hung up without saying goodbye. He drove back to the cabin through darkness, so complete it felt like drowning. His mind spun through scenarios, strategies, contingencies. Everything led to the same conclusion Marco had already voiced. Run or fight. Risk everything or lose everything. There were no good options. Elena was waiting when he arrived, Gabriel asleep in her arms. She took one look at his face and knew. "Tell me," she said simply. Adrian told her everything. The attorney, Marco's warning, Santini's contractors, the impossible choice. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for so long Adrian thought she might not speak at all. "I won't run again," she said finally. Her voice was calm, certain. "I can't live like that, and I won't raise Gabriel like that. Always moving, always afraid, never settling. That's not a life. Staying means fighting. Then we fight." "Elena, you don't understand what that means." "I understand perfectly." Her eyes met his, fierce and unflinching. "I understand that if we run now, we'll run forever. There will always be another Santini, another threat, another reason to disappear. At some point, we have to stand our ground. And if we lose, then we lose together." Elena shifted Gabriel gently. "But I'd rather fight for the life we're building than spend the rest of my existence looking over my shoulder." Adrian crossed to her, touched her face. "You're asking me to put you in danger. I'm asking you to trust that we're stronger together than we are running alone." She turned her head, kissed his palm. "And I'm asking you to trust these people. Frank, Carol, Maggie, they're not civilians, Adrian. They're our community, and communities protect their own. You want me to tell them the truth? I want you to give them a choice. The same choice you gave me." Elena's voice was steady. "Let them decide if they want to help or if they want us to leave quietly. But don't make that decision for them." It went against every instinct Adrian had developed over 15 years of keeping secrets, controlling information, trusting no one. But as he looked at Elena, at the woman who'd sacrificed everything to protect their son, who'd welcomed him back without hesitation, who was asking him to have faith in people instead of fear, he understood that trust was the only move left. "All right," he said, "we tell them." They gathered everyone the next evening at Frank's garage after hours. Frank and Carol, Bill and Marcus, Maggie. 5 people who'd shown them kindness, who'd welcomed them into a town that didn't owe them anything. Adrian stood before them, Elena beside him with Gabriel against her shoulder, and told them the truth. Not all of it, not the details of what he'd done, the blood he'd spilled, the empire he'd ruled, but enough. Enough that they understood he'd been someone dangerous, someone powerful, and that danger was coming because he'd chosen to walk away. The silence when he finished was crushing. Maggie spoke first. "So you're not actually from Baltimore?" "No," Adrian admitted. "And your name's not really Alex Morgan?" "No." "But the baby's really yours." Adrian glanced at Elena, at Gabriel sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Yes, he's really mine." Maggie nodded slowly. "And these people coming, they're dangerous. Very. How dangerous?" Adrian met her eyes. "The kind of dangerous that kills people who get in the way." Bill whistled low. Marcus touched his arm, squeezed gently. Carol looked at Frank, some silent communication passing between them. Frank stood, crossed his arms. "So, what are you asking us? Permission to stay? Help fighting? What?" "I'm asking if you want us to leave," Adrian said, "before trouble arrives, before anyone gets hurt because of us." "That's not your decision to make," Carol said firmly. "This is our town. We decide who belongs and who doesn't." "Carol's right," Maggie added. "You think you're the first person who ever came to Millbrook running from something? Half this town is here because somewhere else didn't work out. That's what small towns are for, fresh starts." "But we could bring violence," Elena interjected. "Real violence. Are you willing to accept that risk?" Bill exchanged a look with Marcus, then spoke quietly. 20 years ago, Marcus and I left San Francisco because being openly together wasn't safe. We'd been attacked, threatened, told we didn't belong. We came here because we heard Millbrook was different. You know who convinced the town to accept us? Frank's father. He stood up in the town hall and said, "These boys do good work, pay their bills, and mind their business. That's all that matters." People listened. "The point," Marcus continued, "is that communities are only as strong as their willingness to protect their people. You're our people now. So if trouble's coming, we face it together. Adrian's throat tightened. You don't know what you're agreeing to. Neither did you when you left your old life, Frank pointed out. But you did it anyway, for them. He gestured at Elena and Gabriel. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are now. I could get you killed, Adrian said bluntly. We're all dying eventually, Maggie said with typical bluntness. Question is whether we do it standing up for something that matters. Carol stood, moved to Elena, touched Gabriel's sleeping head gently. This baby deserves to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere he's loved and protected. We can give him that. But more importantly, you two deserve a chance at a real life. We're not going to let some criminals from the city take that away. Adrian looked at these 5 people, strangers 3 months ago, neighbors now, apparently willing to risk everything for people they barely knew. Why? He asked, his voice rough. Why would you do this? Because it's right, Frank said simply. And because we can. The plan they developed was born from necessity and desperation in equal measure. Frank knew people, veterans from his army days who'd settled in the area, men who understood tactics and weren't afraid of a fight. Bill had connections to the county sheriff, a woman who'd grown up in Millbrook and didn't appreciate outsiders bringing trouble to her jurisdiction. Maggie knew every sightline and hiding spot within 5 miles, knowledge accumulated from 70 years of living in these woods. And Adrian knew how men like Santini thought, how they operated, what they'd expect, and what would surprise them. They'll scout first, Adrian explained, using a map of the area Bill had provided. Look for vulnerabilities, escape routes, optimal approaches. They'll want to hit fast and hard, minimize exposure. The cabin's too isolated, Marcus observed. You'd be sitting ducks out there. That's why we won't be at the cabin, Adrian said. We'll be here. He pointed to a location on the map, an old barn on Frank's property, set back from the road but visible from the house. Central location, good sight lines, multiple exits. We make it look like we're still at the cabin, but actually set up here. And when they hit the empty cabin, Frank asked, the sheriff and her deputies are waiting. Adrian's mind worked through scenarios like solving an equation. We catch them in the act on attempted murder charges. They go away, and Santini loses his reach. What if they don't go to the cabin? Carol asked. What if they come here first? Then we're ready. Adrian's voice was cold, certain, and they wish they'd stayed in the city. Elena had been quiet, listening. Now she spoke. What about Gabriel? Where do we put him? Everyone turned to look at her. He's not staying with us, Elena said firmly. Not if there's even a chance of violence. I won't risk him. My daughter lives 3 towns over, Carol offered. She has kids of her own. Gabriel could stay there until this is over. You'd trust her with him? Elena asked. Carol smiled gently. I'd trust her with my life. I promise you she'll guard him like he's her own. Elena looked at Adrian. He saw the fear in her eyes, the maternal instinct screaming against separation from her infant son. But he also saw the steel beneath it, the woman who'd made impossible choices before and would make them again to protect her child. Okay, Elena whispered, but only until it's safe. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Carol took Gabriel to her daughter's house, a tearful goodbye that broke something in both Elena and Adrian. The cabin was staged to look occupied, lights on timers, curtains adjusted daily by Bill, even a scarecrow in a coat to suggest movement from a distance. Frank's barn was converted into a defensive position, sleeping areas separated from sightlines, supplies stockpiled, communication systems established. 4 of Frank's veteran friends arrived quietly, men who asked no questions and moved with the efficiency of soldiers who'd never really stopped being soldiers. Adrian taught them what to expect, Santini's tactics, likely approaches, probable timing. The sheriff, a woman named Torres with suspicious eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, agreed to stage deputies near the cabin. I don't like vigilante justice, she told Adrian bluntly, but I like outside criminals thinking they can operate in my county even less. We do this by the book. Catch them in the act, arrest them legal, prosecute them proper. Agreed, Adrian said. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a long conversation about exactly who you are and why people are coming after you. Fair enough. Elena stayed close to Adrian through the preparations, her presence both comfort and reminder of what he was fighting for. She'd been quiet since Gabriel left, the absence of her son leaving a visible wound. "He's safe," Adrian assured her for the 100th time. "I know." Elena leaned against him. But knowing and feeling are different things. They stood in the barn loft, looking out at the dark woods that had become their home. Somewhere out there, danger was coming. But here, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with them, Adrian felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. "When this is over," Elena said quietly, "what do we do?" "We live," Adrian replied. "We rent that apartment in town. I keep working at the garage. You do Frank's books. We bring Gabriel home and raise him here." "You really think we can have that? After everything?" Adrian pulled her close. "I have to believe we can. Otherwise, what was any of this for?" Elena turned in his arms, looked up at him. "I love you, Adrian Moretti." "I love you too, Elena Cruz." He smiled slightly. "Or should I say Ella Morgan?" "I'm both. I'll always be both." She kissed him gently. "Just like you're both the man you were and the man you're becoming." They held each other as darkness deepened, waiting for the storm they knew was coming. It arrived on the third night. The motion sensors placed around the cabin triggered at 2 a.m., 3 vehicles approaching without headlights, moving with tactical precision. Adrian was awake instantly, adrenaline replacing sleep. "They're here," he announced quietly. The barn came alive with controlled urgency. Frank and his veterans moved to positions. Torres was alerted by radio. Elena stayed in the loft with Carol, both women armed with shotguns they'd practiced with over the past 2 days. Adrian watched through night vision binoculars as figures emerged from the vehicles. 6 men, professional in their movements, equipped with weapons that reflected moonlight. "Sheriff's en route," Marcus reported from the radio station. "ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes might as well be forever. Adrian watched the contractors approach the cabin, spreading out to cover all exits. They moved well, too well to be simple muscle. These were trained operators, the kind who wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't leave witnesses, the kind Adrian had once employed himself. The lead contractor reached the cabin door, tested it, found it locked, gestured to another man who produced a small breaching tool. 90 seconds to sheriff, Marcus updated. The door breached. The contractors flowed inside with practiced efficiency, weapons raised, moving room to room. Adrian could imagine their confusion. Staged furniture, running generator, all the signs of occupation with no actual people. They'd been set up, and they'd know it. The question was whether they'd run or fight. The answer came when the lead contractor emerged, spoke into a radio, and all 6 men immediately moved back toward their vehicles with the speed of professionals who recognized a trap. "They're running," Frank observed. "Sheriff's blocking the road," Torres's voice crackled over the radio. "Nobody's going anywhere." What followed happened fast. The contractors saw the deputy vehicles blocking their exit, split-second calculation visible in their body language. 2 immediately dropped their weapons, raised their hands. The other 4 scattered into the woods. Desperate move, but better than capture. Torres's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is the sheriff. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender." Gunfire erupted, one of the running contractors firing at the deputies, desperation overriding training. The deputies returned fire. Adrian was moving before conscious thought, years of tactical training overriding 3 months of civilian life. He grabbed a rifle, one of Frank's hunting guns, and headed for the barn door. "Adrian, don't!" Elena started. "Stay here," he ordered, already outside. The woods erupted with violence, flashlights cutting through darkness, shouts, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing between trees. Adrian moved through it with the muscle memory of a life he thought he'd left behind, tracking the fleeing contractors by sound and shadow. He found one pinned down behind a fallen tree, trading shots with 2 deputies. The man was young, maybe 30, with the desperate eyes of someone who'd accepted the job without understanding what it would cost. Adrian circled wide, came up behind him. Dropped the weapon. The contractor spun, gun rising, then froze when he saw Adrian's rifle already aimed at his center mass. "You don't want to die in these woods," Adrian said quietly. "Drop the weapon and surrender." "You're him," the contractor said, recognition dawning. "Moretti. Was. Now I'm just a mechanic who wants to go home to his family. Adrian's voice was cold, certain. Drop the weapon. The gun clattered to the ground. By dawn, all 6 contractors were in custody, along with 3 more men who'd been providing overwatch from the road. None of them had been killed, though 2 had injuries from the brief firefight. Sheriff Torres stood in Frank's barn, surveying the defensive position with professional assessment. "You want to tell me who you really are?" she asked Adrian. "A father," Adrian replied. "That's all I am now." Torres studied him. "These men came here to kill you. That tells me you were someone important once, someone dangerous." "I was. I'm not anymore." "That's not how this works. You don't just walk away from—" "Sheriff," Frank interrupted gently. "Sometimes people deserve a second chance. Alex here has been nothing but a good neighbor, a hard worker, and a decent man. Whatever he was before doesn't change who he is now." Torres looked between them, then sighed. "I'm going to need a statement, a detailed one. And depending on what those contractors say when they start talking, I might need more." "I understand," Adrian said. "But," Torres continued, "as far as I'm concerned, you and your family were victims of an attempted attack. How you knew to prepare, who helped you, why they came, that's all details for later. For now, you're safe." Relief flooded through Adrian. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We caught the hired help, but whoever sent them is still out there." She was right, and Adrian knew it. Santini wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop, not while his paranoia fed on itself. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Adrian drove to Carol's daughter's house and collected his son, held Gabriel against his chest and breathed in the milk and baby powder scent of him, felt the impossible weight of love and relief. Elena cried when she saw them, taking Gabriel with shaking hands, kissing his face over and over while he squirmed and fussed at the sudden attention. "It's over," Adrian told her. "For now," Elena replied, but she was smiling through tears. They returned to Frank's barn where the community had gathered, not to celebrate, but to simply be together after the violence. Carol made coffee. Maggie produced a flask of whiskey that got passed around. Bill and Marcus told war stories. The veterans Frank had called compared the night's action to other operations, other fights. And Adrian sat with Elena and Gabriel, surrounded by people who'd risked everything for them, and understood that he'd found something more valuable than any empire. He'd found home. The contractors talked within 48 hours. Sheriff Torres called Adrian to her office on a gray Monday morning, the kind of cold that promised snow before nightfall. She gestured for him to sit, then slid a file folder across her desk. "Federal prosecutors are very interested in what these men have to say," she said without preamble. Turns out they were hired by someone with extensive criminal connections, someone named Vincent Santini. Adrian's expression didn't change, though his pulse quickened. "Never heard of him." "That's funny, because he seems to know quite a bit about you." Torres leaned back in her chair. "The contractors identified you as their target, said they were hired to eliminate Adrian Moretti and anyone with him. That name mean anything to you?" There was no point lying, not anymore. "It's who I used to be." "Used to be," Torres repeated. "And what were you exactly?" Adrian met her gaze steadily. "Someone who made a lot of money doing things I'm not proud of. Someone who hurt people. Someone who built power on fear." He paused. "Someone I don't want to be anymore." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying him with the assessment of someone who'd spent 20 years reading people. "The feds want you to testify. About Santini, about the organization, about everything you know." "In exchange for what?" "Immunity from prosecution for any crimes you might have committed while part of that organization. Witness protection, if you want it. A fresh start, legal and official." It was everything Adrian should want. A clean slate, government-sanctioned. Protection for Elena and Gabriel that didn't depend on small-town goodwill and luck. "What's the catch?" Adrian asked. "You testify, you go into witness protection, you disappear. New identities, new location, the whole program. But it means leaving here, leaving these people who helped you, starting over again somewhere the feds choose." Adrian thought about Frank teaching him to rebuild carburetors, about Carol bringing meals when Elena was too tired to cook, about Maggie's gruff acceptance and Bill's quiet friendship. He thought about the community that had risked everything to protect his family. "And if I don't testify?" Torres's expression was sympathetic. "Then the feds have no leverage against Santini. He stays free, stays dangerous, and eventually he'll try again. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but men like him don't forget. So my choices are betray the people who saved me or live under constant threat. Those are your choices, Torres confirmed. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Adrian stood, moved to the window. Outside, Millbrook went about its business. Pickup trucks and friendly waves, neighbors who knew each other's names and histories. A life so different from the one he'd left that it felt like a different planet. Can I think about it? He asked. You've got 72 hours. After that, the feds move forward with what they have, and the offer disappears. Adrian nodded and left. He found Elena at Frank's garage, Gabriel strapped to her chest as she sorted through invoices. She looked up when he entered, read his expression immediately. What happened? Adrian told her everything. The testimony offer, the immunity deal, witness protection, the impossible choice. Elena listened quietly, one hand absently rubbing Gabriel's back. When Adrian finished, she set down the invoice she'd been holding. What do you want to do? She asked. I want to stay here, build the life we started. Watch Gabriel grow up in a place where people know our names and actually care. Adrian's voice roughened. But I can't do that if Santini's still out there. Eventually, he'll send more people. Better people. And next time, someone might get hurt. So we take the deal. We go into witness protection. And abandon everyone who helped us. Frank, Carol, Maggie, they risked their lives. I can't just disappear on them. Elena stood, came to him. Then we find another way. There is no other way. Torres was clear, testify and leave, or stay and live with the threat. She gave you the government's options, Elena said. But you're not a government man anymore, Adrian. You're a problem solver, so solve this problem. Adrian looked at her, at the certainty in her eyes, and felt something click into place. She was right. He'd been thinking like someone waiting for permission, for an authority figure to give him acceptable choices. But he'd built an empire by making his own choices. Maybe it was time to remember how. He called Marco that night from a new burner phone, from a location 20 miles from Millbrook. Tell me about Santini's operation, Adrian said without greeting. Current structure, weak points, who's actually loyal versus who's just afraid. Marco was silent for a long moment. You're not thinking about testifying. Answer the question. Adrian, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm planning to end this, permanently, without running, without witness protection, without abandoning people who've earned better. Adrian's voice was hard, certain. Now tell me what I need to know. Marco sighed. Santini's consolidated power, but it's fragile. He's ruling through fear and paranoia, which means people are loyal until they have a better option. His inner circle is down to 3 people. Everyone else is waiting to see if he survives the federal investigation. What federal investigation? The one the contractors triggered when they got arrested. Feds have been looking at Santini for years, but they never had enough evidence. Now they've got attempted murder charges connected to an interstate criminal enterprise. They're building a RICO case. Adrian's mind worked through the implications. How long until they move? Months, maybe. Federal cases move slow, but Santini knows they're coming, which makes him more dangerous. Cornered animals bite. Then we don't corner him, Adrian said. We give him what he wants. Which is? Me. The plan was insane, risky, and probably suicidal, which meant it might actually work. Adrian spent the next 2 days preparing. He contacted Sheriff Torres, told her he needed more time to consider the testimony offer. She wasn't happy, but agreed to a 1-week extension. Then he made calls. Careful calls using intermediaries Marco provided, reaching out to people within Santini's organization who remembered when Adrian had been in charge. People who'd benefited from his leadership, who'd thrived under his protection, who'd watched Santini's paranoid reign with increasing concern. The message was simple. Adrian Moretti was willing to meet. Neutral ground. No weapons. No violence. Just a conversation to end this cleanly. He'll never agree, Elena said when Adrian explained the plan. He wants you dead. He wants the threat gone, Adrian corrected. Death is just one way to achieve that. If I can convince him I'm not a threat, that I have nothing he needs to fear, he'll take the win. And if you can't convince him? Adrian touched her face gently. Then you and Gabriel are already safe. Torres has the testimony. The feds will move on Santini within weeks. You take the witness protection deal. Start fresh somewhere far from here. Without you, if that's what it takes. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I didn't survive 8 months alone and fight to build this life just to lose you now. You won't lose me. This will work. You don't know that. No, Adrian admitted. But I know doing nothing means running forever, and I'm done running. Elena pulled him close, fierce and desperate. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Adrian, Gabriel needs his mother. If this goes wrong, he needs you alive to raise him, to tell him about his father, to give him the life we wanted. Adrian's voice was gentle, but unyielding. Please, Elena, let me do this. She cried against his chest, her body shaking with fear and love and fury, but eventually she nodded. You come back to me, she whispered. You hear me? You come back. I will, Adrian promised, praying it wasn't a lie. The meeting was set for a warehouse on the edge of the city Adrian had once ruled. Neutral territory, verified empty by both sides, with Marco serving as the intermediary guaranteeing safe passage. Adrian drove there alone, in the Honda Civic that had carried them to Millbrook, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt instead of the expensive suits he'd once favored. He looked like Alex Morgan, mechanic, but he felt like Adrian Moretti, strategist. The warehouse was exactly as remembered. Concrete and shadows, high ceilings that swallowed sound, loading docks that faced empty lots. Santini was already there, standing in the center with 3 bodyguards positioned strategically around the space. Adrian parked, climbed out slowly, hands visible and empty. Adrian Moretti, Santini said, his voice echoing. I wasn't sure you'd actually show. I'm here to end this, Adrian replied, walking forward until he stood 10 feet from Santini. Close enough to talk, far enough to react if violence erupted. Santini looked different from their last meeting, thinner, harder, with the hunted expression of someone who'd realized power came with prices he hadn't anticipated. You walked away, left me holding an organization that's falling apart because everyone keeps comparing me to you. That's not my problem. It became your problem when you made me look weak. Santini's voice rose. When you left, people started questioning everything, wondering if I was good enough, strong enough, smart enough. Do you know what I've had to do to maintain control? I don't care, Adrian said bluntly. I left that life behind. I have a family now, a real life. I'm not a threat to you. You're breathing. That makes you a threat. Only if I want your position, which I don't. Adrian kept his voice calm, reasonable. Vincent, I could have fought you. I could have taken back control before you ever consolidated power. But I didn't. I walked away completely. Doesn't that tell you something? Santini's expression was suspicious, uncertain. It tells me you're planning something. I'm planning to raise my son in peace, that's all. Adrian took a step forward. Santini's guards tensed, but Adrian ignored them. I know what you're afraid of. You think I've got insurance, files, evidence, recordings, something I'm holding to guarantee you leave me alone. Don't you? No. Adrian's voice rang with truth. I have nothing but a new name and a job fixing cars in a town where no one knows what I used to be. I'm not a threat, Vincent. I'm just a father who wants to go home. Then why send your friend Marco to interfere with my operations? I didn't send Marco. He made his own choices. Adrian paused. But I can tell you this, the feds are building a case against you. The contractors you hired gave them everything they needed. You've got months, maybe weeks before they move. Santini's face went pale. You're lying. Call your lawyers. They'll confirm it. Adrian pressed the advantage. You're facing federal RICO charges. Your organization is fracturing. You're bleeding money trying to maintain control. And you're wasting resources hunting me when I'm not even playing the game anymore. So what are you proposing? I disappear permanently. You never hear from me again. In exchange, you stop looking for me, stop threatening my family, and focus on surviving what's coming. Adrian's voice was hard. Because I promise you, Vincent, if anything happens to my family, if even a hint of threat comes near them, I will dedicate my entire existence to destroying everything you've built. Not because I want power, because I want revenge. The threat hung in the air, backed by 15 years of reputation. Santini studied him, calculation visible in his eyes. How do I know you'll keep your word? Because I kept it before. I said I was walking away and I walked away. I said I wanted out and I got out. Adrian met his gaze steadily. My word is the only thing I brought from that life to this one. I won't break it. Silence stretched between them. Santini's guard shifted nervously. Somewhere in the warehouse, water dripped with steady persistence. Finally, Santini spoke. You disappear. Completely. I never see you, never hear from you, never have to think about you again. Agreed. And if the feds come asking questions? I tell them nothing. Your organization, your operations, your business, none of it involves me anymore. Adrian paused. But Vincent, when they come, and they will come, take the deal they offer. Don't fight it. You'll lose. Santini's jaw clenched. That sounds like advice. It's a gift. The last one you'll get from me. Adrian turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Marco's loyal. To the organization, not to either of us. When this falls apart, and it will, he's your best chance at managing the collapse. Trust him. Like you did? Exactly like I did. Adrian walked back to his car without looking back, half expecting a bullet between his shoulders. But he reached the Civic, climbed in, started the engine, and drove away. He called Torres the next morning from a coffee shop in Millbrook. I'll testify, he said, but I'm not going into witness protection. That's not how this works. It is now. Adrian's voice was firm. I'll give you everything you need on Santini's organization, structures, operations, financial systems, enough to put him away for 20 years. But I do it on my terms. I stay here, with my family, in this town. The program exists for your protection. I don't need the program. I need immunity and the legal right to be left alone. Adrian paused. And I need one more thing. When you arrest Santini, you make it clear that I cooperated fully, that I gave you everything. I want him to know I kept my word about not interfering with his operations, right up until he forced my hand by sending those contractors. Torres was quiet for a long moment. You're using the testimony as proof you weren't coming after him. I'm using it to make sure he never comes after me again. Once he's in federal custody, facing decades in prison, there's no point in revenge. I'm not a threat. I'm just a witness who told the truth. This is highly irregular. So as a former crime boss becoming a small-town mechanic, Adrian's voice softened. Sheriff, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the chance to live a normal life with my family. I'll give you what you need. Just let me stay home. Another long pause, then Torres sighed. I'll talk to the prosecutors. No promises. That's all I ask. The federal prosecutors agreed after 3 days of negotiation. Adrian would provide detailed testimony, documents would be prepared, and when Santini was arrested, which Torres assured him would be within the month, Adrian's cooperation would be made part of the public record. In exchange, immunity from prosecution and the right to remain in Millbrook under his chosen name, with regular check-ins but no forced relocation. It wasn't witness protection. It was something better, freedom with accountability. Adrian spent the next 2 weeks working with federal investigators, answering questions, mapping organizational structures, explaining financial systems he'd built and walked away from. It was exhausting, draining, like performing an autopsy on his former life. But every evening, he came home to the cabin, still home until they found an apartment in town, where Elena waited with Gabriel, where dinner was simple and warm, where his life felt real in a way power never had. How much longer, Elena asked one night, watching him struggle to stay awake over cold dinner. They arrested Santini this morning, Adrian said. The testimony is done. It's over. Elena's eyes widened. Over? Completely over? Completely. Adrian smiled, exhaustion giving way to relief. Santini's in federal custody. The organization's collapsing. And according to Torres, I'm officially Alex Morgan, mechanic, with no legal obligation beyond checking in quarterly with federal probation. Elena circled the table, pulled him to his feet, kissed him with an intensity that made him forget how tired he was. We made it, she whispered against his lips. We actually made it. We made it, Adrian agreed. Gabriel chose that moment to wail from his bassinet, demanding attention with the imperious cry of a 4-month-old who'd learned that crying brought results. They laughed, broke apart, and Elena retrieved their son while Adrian cleaned up dinner. It was mundane and perfect, and everything he'd never known he wanted. 3 months later, they signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment above the hardware store in downtown Millbrook. It wasn't fancy. The plumbing sometimes groaned, the heating was uneven, and the stairs creaked loud enough to wake the dead. But it had a real kitchen, a bathtub big enough for Gabriel, and windows that overlooked Main Street where they could watch the town wake up each morning. Frank helped them move their meager possessions, along with Bill, Marcus, Carol, and Maggie. The entire town seemed to show up with furniture donations, kitchen supplies, baby items people's children had outgrown. "Welcome home," Carol said, hugging Elena while Gabriel drowsed against her shoulder. Home. The word settled into Adrian's chest like an anchor. He kept working at Frank's garage, taking on more complex jobs as his skills deepened. Elena expanded her bookkeeping to include 3 other local businesses, working from home with Gabriel playing on a blanket beside her desk. They fell into rhythms that felt permanent. Weekly dinners with Frank and Carol, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Sunday afternoons at the park where Gabriel learned to sit up, then crawl, then pull himself upright against furniture. The town embraced them fully, completely, asking nothing about their past and caring only about their present. When Gabriel took his first steps, 10 months old, impossibly early, at least a dozen people were there to cheer. When Elena and Adrian's first wedding anniversary approached, the anniversary of their legal marriage under false names, but their anniversary nonetheless, the community threw them a party at the town hall. "Speech!" someone called as the evening wound down. Adrian and Elena slow dancing to music from someone's phone. Adrian looked around the room, at Frank grinning broadly, at Carol wiping happy tears, at Maggie trying to hide her smile behind gruffness, at Bill and Marcus swaying together, at Sheriff Torres who'd become a friend despite everything, at the community that had saved him without knowing what they were saving him from. "A year ago," Adrian said, his voice carrying across the room, "I was someone else. Someone I'm not proud of. I came here running from that person, from that life. And you," his voice caught. "You gave me a chance to be someone better. You didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. You just showed me what community means." He pulled Elena closer, looked down at Gabriel sleeping in Carol's arms. "I've had power. I've had money. I've had respect built on fear." Adrian met the eyes of his neighbors, his friends. "But I've never had what you gave me. A home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful instead of guarded. Thank you for everything." The applause was warm, genuine, and as Adrian returned to dancing with Elena, he felt the last pieces of his old life finally fall away. Adrian Moretti was dead. Alex Morgan was alive. And for the first time in his life, that felt like victory. 5 years passed like water through fingers, too fast and too slow simultaneously. Gabriel grew from infant to toddler to kindergartner, losing the baby roundness and gaining sharp features that mirrored Adrian's own. He was bright, curious, asking impossible questions about how things worked, and why the sky was blue, and whether dragons had ever been real. Adrian answered every question with the patience of someone who'd learned that fatherhood was about showing up, day after day, for the small moments that built into a life. Elena flourished. Her bookkeeping expanded into full business management for a dozen local companies. She took online courses, earned certifications, built a reputation for being thorough and trustworthy. But more than that, she bloomed in the safety of a life without fear, laughing more easily, sleeping without nightmares, finding joy in simplicity. They bought a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but theirs completely. 3 bedrooms, a yard where Gabriel could play, a garage where Adrian could work on cars in his spare time. Elena planted a garden. Adrian built a swing set. They hosted barbecues and game nights and slowly, steadily built the life they'd fled to Millbrook seeking. The past faded until it felt like something that had happened to different people. Marco called once, 2 years after Santini's arrest. "He took a plea deal," Marco reported. 23 years. He'll die in prison. "And the organization?" Adrian asked. "Dissolved. Most people took deals, went legitimate, or got arrested. It's over, Adrian, completely over." "What about you?" Marco laughed. "I run a security consulting firm now. Completely legal, mostly boring, and I sleep better than I have in decades. Turns out being honest is less stressful than I expected." "Sounds terrible," Adrian said, smiling. Absolutely awful. I highly recommend it. Marco paused. You happy, Adrian? Adrian looked out the window of his garage, watching Elena push Gabriel on the swing set, hearing his son's laughter carry across the yard. Yeah, Adrian said. I really am. Good. You earned it. They never spoke again, but the closure felt right. The past wasn't haunting him anymore. It was just history. On a crisp October morning, 5 years after arriving in Millbrook, Adrian stood in his backyard watching the sunrise paint the world gold and amber. Gabriel was inside getting ready for school, Elena making breakfast in the kitchen, both of them chattering about the day ahead. Frank had offered to make Adrian a partner in the garage last month. Carol had asked Elena to help organize a community foundation to support local families in need. They'd both accepted. Their lives had expanded to fill the space Adrian had once occupied with power and control. But this expansion was different. It grew outward into community instead of upward into dominance. It built instead of taking. It felt like peace. Daddy, Gabriel called from the back door. Mom says breakfast is ready. Coming, Adrian called back. He took one last look at the sunrise, at the beauty of a morning that held no threats, no schemes, no violence. Just possibility. Then he turned and went inside to his family. The man who'd once ruled through fear now lived through love. The empire builder had become a father, a husband, a neighbor, a friend. Adrian Moretti had made men kneel with a glance. Alex Morgan made his son laugh every single day. And standing in his kitchen, watching Elena hand Gabriel his lunchbox, seeing his son's gap-toothed smile, feeling the warm ordinariness of a Tuesday morning, Adrian understood something profound. He'd spent 15 years accumulating power, believing it would make him invincible. But he'd never been stronger than he was right now, in this small kitchen, in this small town, with these two people who loved him not for what he could do, but for who he'd chosen to become. You okay? Elena asked, noticing him watching. Adrian crossed to her, kissed her gently. Perfect. Everything's perfect. Gabriel made a disgusted sound. Gross! No kissing before school! They laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth. And Adrian Moretti, the man who'd once made a city tremble, walked his 5-year-old son to the school bus, waved goodbye like any other father, and went to work fixing cars. The empire was gone. The power was dust. The fear was forgotten. But Gabriel's laugh echoed in his memory all day. And when Adrian came home that evening, when Elena greeted him with updates about the foundation, and Gabriel showed him a drawing from school, when they ate dinner together and argued about bedtime and read stories about dragons who learned to be gentle, Adrian felt what he'd never felt while wearing expensive suits and commanding armies. Complete. That night, after Gabriel was asleep and Elena was reading in bed, Adrian stood at the window of their small house, looking out at the quiet street where pickup trucks were parked in driveways and lights glowed warm in windows. Somewhere out there, his old life existed in federal records and fading memories. Santini was in prison. Marco was consulting. The organization Adrian had built was a footnote in criminal history. But here, in this town, in this house, with this family, he was just Alex Morgan, father, husband, mechanic, neighbor. And for a man who'd once needed an empire to feel significant, the smallness of that identity felt infinite. Elena's voice called from the bedroom. You coming to bed? Yeah, Adrian answered. Be right there. He took one last look at the peaceful street, at the life he'd built from the ashes of everything he'd destroyed. Then he turned off the light and went to bed beside the woman he loved, in the house they'd made home, in the town that had saved them. The storm that had brought them together was long over, and the man who'd once ruled through fear now lived through grace. He'd found peace. He'd found purpose. He'd found himself. And every morning, when Gabriel climbed into bed between them, demanding pancakes and stories, Adrian remembered why he'd walked away from power. This was better. This was everything. This was home.